Welcome to another edition of Professor Speaks. Our topic for today is immunizations, but before we get into that, I'd like to remind you to hit like, subscribe, and hit the little bell for notifications. Hello and welcome to another edition of Professor Speaks. My name is Alex Hernandez. Alongside me as always is Dr. Craig Stern. And today we're going to be talking about immunizations because it's National Immunization Awareness Month. So, oh yeah, clap it up pretty soon. So we need to talk about it again because there's still a lot of false narratives being pushed around about immunizations. So first and foremost, for those that don't know, what are immunizations?
Yeah, in a very simple way, the body has its own internal defense mechanism. If you get an infection, the body mobilizes antibodies to attack the infection and effectively clear it out. If it's too big and the antibodies can't handle it, then clearly it takes antibiotics, antivirals, a host of things. But what you're trying to do is boost the body's overall defense mechanism. It is one of the cornerstones of prevention, as we've talked about over and over, of trying to make sure that you prevent something because it's easier, cheaper, less costly, less resources to deal with something if you prevent it than to have to treat it.
Right. It's cheaper before you get it, right?
Yeah.
So as a result, what can one expect from one immunization?
Well, it depends on the kind of immunization.
Right.
In general, most people know that they get a flu shot every year. Perhaps they get a pneumococcus one if there's a particular kind of bacteria that is floating around, especially for people who have heart disease, things like that. But there could be other kind of infective processes for a host of things, from certain hepatitis things, certain things with with really abstruse kind of diseases that you find in certain parts of the world. They've been trying to build a vaccine for malaria for a very long time. Once they do, they'll deal with one of the major killers in the world through malaria. So a host of different things. But one could expect, if you get a shot, that it's helping to boost your overall internal defense mechanism. And it may be one shot, it may be 2 or 3 shots, well spaced in order to make sure that you have it. Fundamentally, and the most important thing is babies need it because they don't have any internal defense until they've aged a bit.
They haven't had a chance to boost up their immune system.
They haven't boosted it up. Older people who have their overall immune systems kind of declining need a kind of a boost. And then everybody, for flu or otherwise, every year needs to have some sort of a vaccine.
Right, and we've talked about the flu vaccine before, but there's still a lot of false stories about the flu shot.
Yeah.
And some of them where it causes autism, right? And when the baby gets an immunization, there's a lot of mothers or concerned mothers who read this story that this baby got autism and it was because of a flu shot.
Yeah. Some studies identify some association, frequently not causation. I mean, they don't cause it, but somehow they're associated with it. There have been histories, and certainly what's known as anti-vaxxers, or people that are against vaccines, have heard about a study that an individual physician did that presumably associated having a vaccination with autism. That was identified as being false. The physician lost his license. He was thrown out of the internal community, etc., of what went on, and that was proven to be just plain false. But you can understand, because parents hear this, and then they're worried that, well, if they give this shot, potentially that can cause create a problem for my child, and certainly no one wants to do that and create a problem that their child is going to have to deal with for the rest of their life. In this particular case, it was just pure nonsense. But we understand that, and we have to realize that science moves on, you can talk about all these different things about what's real, what's not real, whether something fits with my opinions, doesn't fit with my opinions. But this is medicine.
Right.
You can't play with what is identified as being what you think and fit your opinion about what should be one way or another.
There's no subjective truths.
No. Now, truth may change without doubt. Right. I mean, this is science. You have science at one point. There's information that happens later, and it identifies that that's wrong, or maybe it needs further validation or something like that.
Right.
That's normal. That just is the normal progress of science as people learn more.
Of course.
But certainly, people are not going to deny the need for a polio vaccine that literally saved millions of people in dealing with it. So we need to be very clear about where the information is. It's well published. The Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, I think Em will put a link to it in this particular Professor Speaks. But there is an ample amount of information where people can read about it and see what is real information and what is false. And we have to understand this is science. So there's always going to be some debate about things. You don't debate, you don't make up your own facts. You debate what the interpretation may be.
Right.
But you don't make up your own facts to identify that something is real when it's not real.
And then that's important because a lot of what's going on, you hear fake news, you hear all these other different political false stories. You really got to look at, in terms of science, where can you go to find information that you can trust? And you mentioned CDC. I'm sure FDA has has scientific articles published as well. So you can go to these places that are government sponsored. They don't have any political affiliations. They're just there to give out facts.
Yes, and just to internationalize this, the World Health Organization, the WHO, has information. Literally every country has information in their particular centers for disease control. This is something that everybody is monitoring because in today's world, in the past you could have a disease and it stayed relatively concentrated in a given geographical area. But today people move. I mean, you get on an airplane.
The world is a lot smaller now.
It is much smaller, and you get on an airplane 5 hours later, you're 3,000 miles away. So you can easily see where things could spread. It happened with bird flu that moved from China to Canada, and some issues potentially in the United States and other places. Bottom line is that there's groups of experts. They have experts like this in many pharmacies that have it. There are physician experts and travel experts. And then, of course, the CDC, the FDA, the World Health Organization, the Health and Human Services Association. Everybody has information to talk about what is real, what is where the data is today, so that people can make appropriate decisions.
And it's also important to note that these studies that are published on CDC and other various organizations are double-checked, triple-checked. They go over the sources and the studies and how it was obtained. So it's very important to see what is being looked over and being verified as true.
Yes.
Also, moving along with the flu shots and other various immunizations, there's side effects. But they need to, what the people need to understand is what's common, what's okay, and the very unusual, rare side effects that might need to be treated. I think that's what's important.
And if we make absolute statements, then we're wrong in science, we're wrong in healthcare, we're wrong everywhere. But when people give shots, one can expect potentially a local reaction. It may be red where they gave the shot. It may be a little bit painful depending if they hit a large muscle or otherwise. There may be some that problem. But in general, those things tend to go away in a day or two and they don't last. If, on the other hand, someone has a severe type of reaction, like you would with an allergic reaction, where you have trouble breathing, where you have a severe, you're beginning to see, and it's fuzzy around what's going on,
right.
or you begin to have very high temperatures. These are the kind of things that need to be seen right away and for individuals to address right away. They are very, very rare. We are talking about things that just don't happen very often.
Right.
But it's incumbent on everybody,
of course,
to be aware that if they have a problem that's totally out of the norm, it's not the little redness, it's not a little bit of pain, it's nothing that really creates or causes a problem. You have a little bit of pain and maybe it lasts for a week or something like that, depending on the technique that was used, is really no big deal. The real problem is if you begin to have problems you don't expect, such as respiratory problems. Those are a big deal,
right.
Such as temperature spiking. That's a big deal. Issues with regard to if you begin to get some heart flutters. We're talking about this not to scare people. We're talking about it so we can distribute those things that are common from those things that are very rare. And we should realize you don't do something because something is very rare. You do it because you want to control what's going to happen to you in the future.
Right. And I mentioned that it's important because when people get the flu shot, they're just going to go in and nothing's going to happen. Right. But there are some side effects, like a little red, or it might be a little tender there for a little while. But then you go on, right? And then you're prevented from whatever flu is going around at the time.
Right.
So when you're researching, and I hope you at home are researching the immunizations, you'll see something called herd immunity. What exactly does this term mean?
The idea for everybody is, well, I get a shot, I've protected myself, I don't have to worry about everybody else. Effectively, everybody else isn't affected. In reality, when you're dealing with infections, when you're dealing with immunity, everybody is influenced. If, for example, a whole population of people is vaccinated, but a group of people are not, those people get sick. They still can pass on these things actively to other people. The herd immunity is that if you do it, like, for example, and not to be overly dramatic, but if you vaccinate everybody for polio, then effectively polio goes away. It's eradicated.
Right.
But if you vaccinate only a certain part of the people and other people are not vaccinated, those people still have a risk of getting polio, and they can influence everybody else. It's the same reason why schools require that kids have vaccinations, so that they're not, if they don't have a vaccination, that they're infecting other children. It's the same reason why you try and inject and deal with this in high-risk areas, like they do in some places in Africa, some places in South America, some places in Asia, etc., and clearly here in the United States as well.
Right.
So bottom line here is that just because you get a shot doesn't mean that you haven't influenced everybody else. If you don't get a shot, you are influencing everybody else. If you do get a shot, in this particular regard, hopefully everybody is getting it. Right. Which leads to one thing, and that is, okay, the flu shot. So there are good seasons where everybody seems to be relatively healthy and there's not a lot of problems, or like last year where it was a big problem and everybody did. These are methodology problems that obviously people are working towards. And just quickly, if you get a flu shot, it covers somewhere around 6 different types of flu.
Okay.
There are about 144 types of flu. So the flu shot is in general dealing with the 6 that you're covering, but it doesn't cover the other 140 some types.
Right.
These are what you're trying to do. You're trying to do the most common thing year after year with the hope that you've predicted well and everybody is going to get it. But you can have certain types of A flu, B flu, etc. And if they're not covered, people can still get sick. So just because you got it doesn't mean, well, everybody's going to get sick, so I shouldn't have it. Right. No, you didn't get it, so now you've made the other people sick already. And then on top of it, there have been cases where there is other strains that were not covered, and they're causing further problems.
Huh, that's a lot of information to take in. And then you said not to over dramatize, but it's
that over dramatized.
Yeah, it's a very dramatized version of the flu. So, and what he had just mentioned was, what Dr. Stern just mentioned was, it was just a part of why immunizations are important and why everyone should get vaccinated. But you can look it up online on the CDC, FDA, World Health Organization. Everyone's recognizing immunizations, and it is important that you get it because flu season is approaching. So, with that being said, where can professionals and patients get this information?
Well, if you go to the CDC, there are schedules. They are very nicely done in color and graphical to show you
infographics,
yeah. What kind of shots you should get, when you should get them by age, issues what you should get just in the normal course of affairs, or if you're traveling, what you should get, etc. So you should go to the CDC, and M will address it and have a link to it so people can go and find that. It's the easiest, it's graphical, it's easy to read, and that'll help you right away. And then linked to that is a whole bunch of information about all kinds of vaccines, all kinds of flu shots, etc. Bottom line is, it's easier to deal with something if you prevent it than it is to treat it. I'm someone who spent a lot of time in treating, and I can tell you there is no treatment scenario that's any better than stopping it before it happens.
Right. Well, what you mentioned bad reactions earlier. What do you do if you do have a bad reaction?
Well, number one is you should immediately call your doctor or call your pharmacist in order to get a clinical reading of the problem. But if it is severe, you're having trouble with breathing, etc., you should immediately be going, or either calling the paramedics or going to the emergency room or the urgent care center, having them address it right away and solve the problem. These things in this world of 2018 should not be something where someone has a fatal disease or otherwise. It's something that you can immediately get treated, and the rest, and you should be aware of it, and you should get treated.
Once again, they're very rare, but if it does happen, get it treated as soon as possible. Thank you very much, Dr. Stern. That's it for our immunization episode. Once again, it's National Immunization Month, Immunization Awareness Month. So go to your CDC website. We'll have a link from producer M. She'll post it up on there with the video. Remember to go to ProPharmaConsultants.com. We have a free information page called RxInfoX. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the little bell for notifications. We'll see you next week.